My name is Laura El Tantawy, and I'm an Egyptian photographer. In 2005, I went back to Egypt after living in the US for about 10 years, and I wanted to, at that time, really discover what this place that I had been away from for about 9 years really means to me, and sort of how I belonged in that place. That, there were a lot of questions in my head about it and who I am and my identity. The revolution has changed everything for my generation. I'm 31, and Mubarak was the only president I ever knew. And you grow up knowing that politics is one way, and it's like a one-way track. This is the way it is. We have one president, this and that. I've never voted in my entire life. My parents never voted. Nobody that I know ever voted in my whole generations, because the votes were fake. Everything was rigged, so there was no need to go and vote. You knew that he was going to get 99.9% of the vote anyways. So it was just, so these things, you grew up knowing that in your head. So now, okay, this is a time for change. It's sort of a parallel about me and how I feel about the country. And within that, there's the larger context of Egypt in general and what's happening in Egypt. And for me, because I've lived so much of my life outside of Egypt, and I've always felt that strong connection that Egypt is really my home. When people ask me, I always say, yeah, I'm Egyptian, even though I was born in England and I've lived in the US. But this is where I feel connected with the culture, the traditions, obviously the language. So in 2005, I started doing that work, and I went back in early January with Tahrir Square and the revolution and all these events. Now, basically, what I want to do is go on a 1-year road trip across Egypt, and it's something I've really wanted to do for such a long time, and I think this would be the best time and the greatest opportunity to also understand where the country is now going and what that revolution really means to us as Egyptians. So this is kind of what I'm hoping I can explore and understand what that change is. And I think a way of doing that is sort of meeting people across the country, people of all sorts of different social classes and, careers or whatever, and affiliations, and through them sort of understand what that revolution has meant. Well, initially when things happened in Tunisia, I was like, I'm so jealous because I wish this was Egypt. And then at the time when things started to happen in Egypt, I don't think anybody really expected that January 25th, which was the initial call for protest when people went. I don't think anybody really expected that it was going to be as big as it turned out to be. People had been protesting in Egypt since 2005, and I covered some of those protests. And for me, even, I was totally shocked by the things that people were saying in these protests. They were calling Mubarak names. It was People had already broken sort of a barrier of fear, but I think what we saw on January 25th was ultimately the culmination of that, what started in 2005, and you saw that build-up, and then finally there was that massive explosion. And I'm sure that was catalyzed by what happened in Tunisia. People felt, well, it's our time as well. It's time that we do this. I never really think about being a woman covering a particular situation. I think if I start to think about that, it's gonna be an excuse for me to not do certain things, and I don't want that to be the case. I feel like if there's something that I want to do, I just have to do it. Obviously, it's very intimidating, and obviously when you're working in a culture that, is particularly male-dominated, you really do stick out as a woman, especially a woman with a camera, you do stick out even more. But I think, if I start to think about that, it's just going to pull me back, and I can't do that. I'm just going to have to go for it. So I never really think about it, to be honest with you. Well, I'm now trying to raise money on Emphasis to do this 1-year road trip across Egypt. And the way that Emphasis works is that, whatever money you put in, you get a reward for it. But automatically what everybody gets is they become part of the project, which is something that I'm really excited about. So for example, if you choose to support the work by £10, you automatically become part of the project, and we have a conversation throughout this 1 year. You can tell me, Laura, I read about this article, I think you should be going to this area, or Laura, I really don't like what you're doing, or Laura, are you okay, that kind of thing. But automatically we start to have a dialogue about the project in general. But generally also the work on Egypt was received well. I think people like the fact that, there's an Egyptian doing work about Egypt, especially that, I've been doing the work since 2005, and it's kind of, nobody was really paying much attention to it because people didn't really think anything was going to happen in Egypt. It seemed really stable. But actually for people in Egypt, we knew that it wasn't really stable. a lot of it is really more about ideas that I think can be explained in the context of text and stuff like that. But how do I actually tell how the revolution has changed life for a farmer? I don't, visually, I guess. So it's just going to be an exploration, and something I'm really excited about and looking forward to. I'm quite scared about it, but I think it's going to be a really good way for me also to reconnect with the country.